All right, well, I'll try and make this interesting and quick so I can put my coat back on. I'm Thomas Kramer. Today I'm going to be talking a little bit about how AI views content on social media and dictates how that content is distributed, which is an area of technology that I'm really passionate about. So a little information about me. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Measure Studio. I've been working in social media for a bit over 10 years. I ran YouTube optimization over at Disney. I built another technology company called Paladin that was focused on influencer marketing and sold to Brandwatch a couple years ago. And I'm a glutton for punishment, so I'm on startup number 2. In any case, let's get right into the meat of the thing. It's 2024. Social media is 2 decades old, and most content strategy, either from the excellent professionals in this room or otherwise, boils down to post and pray, meaning we as a social media professional group are basically doing things by gut feelings, like, okay, we recognize good content and we're going to push it out. Or we're going to push out content based on the audience response that we're seeing for like that hyper-engaged commenter maybe. But we're not necessarily, in a sophisticated way, taking a data-driven approach and trying to say like what formats, what series of shows, what campaigns are really consistently driving numbers, and what do those things have in common. And the reasons for that are obvious, right? Like social media as a profession is an act of juggling. Social media strategists are making content, they're editing content, they have to be data analysts, they have to be PR people, they have to travel, the list goes on, right? So, data and understanding the mechanics of the technology are really at the bottom of the list because people are just trying to keep the lights on every day. So that's where I come in. I just want to break down a little bit how that process of actually posting content and having it get distributed by platforms works. So it's really 3 pretty simple steps. The first is the platforms analyze the content that you publish. Secondly, they note what users are viewing that content and engaging with it for, watching a reel for a given amount of time or, commenting frequently. And then from there, they're reinforcing that behavior. They're serving that user more and more of the same type of stuff. And this isn't a new idea. Like everyone in this room is pretty familiar with how those rabbit holes are created. But maybe they're not so familiar with how that process has changed in the last 20 years. So, if we start with step 1, platforms analyze content. The origination of this was really geared around hashtags and text. Like most social media content was a link or a tweet or a hashtag or something, and then from there, the platform could really easily understand common elements on a textual basis and, send more of that stuff to the user. Like if you like stuff about the Los Angeles Lakers, great, we see Lakers as a key term in this post and we're going to give it to you more. AI has really revolutionized this process, especially as social media has become more multimedia driven. Most social content is video based now. There's also heavy with like photos, carousels, and other things. Hashtags, textual based metadata like descriptions and post captions have become less voluminous, like there's just less of it to grab onto. And, the platforms have to adapt. How do they understand what's in this video or what's in this photo and send it to those people? AI has to look at that post, extract every little thing about that, turn that into textual data, like there's a frog or a cat or whatever in this thing, and then send it to people who have affinity for it. So this is really important because there's a lot of ways that AI is really good at this process, but there's also some key ways that it's really bad at it. And that's why it's essential for marketers to really understand the mechanics of how this stuff is working. So the rest of this talk is really going to be geared more around the preschool version of the engineering for this type of thing. So let's start from the top. Like computers don't just sit on your desk anymore. Like they have eyes, they have ears. And this branch of technology is part of AI, and it's called computer vision. So it's not just limited to visual-based content. It's also audio, and hopefully not touch and smell in the near future. But we'll see. What's interesting is how do computers understand what they're seeing? So we're going to break down how these models are trained with data from social platforms and can take an image and understand what it actually is. Social media platforms are really an interesting class of companies because they have so much metadata and so much media, billions and billions and billions of videos and images and everything else, that gives them a little bit of an unfair advantage in creating these models and making them accurate. That's why TikTok is so great at serving you something that you're interested in, or Instagram, or whatever. So functionally, the way this works is the platform will take data that has been tagged, like a picture of, in this case, this is really tiny for you in the back, but like pictures of airplanes. Like there's lots of different pictures of airplanes, different types of airplanes, different shots, that contain the ground or the sky or whatever. But if you feed that AI model millions of these things and it knows, okay, all these are airplanes, then it will be trained to recognize an image of an airplane it's never seen before. So functionally, the social platforms are doing this for millions of pieces of subject matter, millions of topics, and giving that massive, massive data set a through line into that AI so it can recognize things. AI models are really good at seeing a few different types of things, and there's obvious use cases for those things. So, objects, this is something like a noun or a verb, like a bird or a cat or a game of basketball or a wedding or something like that, right? Sure. It's, sorry, it's very loud for me up here. Like this. There you go. Yep. Hi. In any case, AI is really good at detecting audio. So like extracting spoken word data and turning that into textual data. Activities, those are those verbs I mentioned. Text and characters. Logos, public figures, famous faces, influencers. This could be athlete, politician, anybody. Expressions on people's faces, like are they happy, are they sad? Violence, so in particular things that contain like weapons, blood, stuff like that. And then adult content, is this racy or fleshy or whatever it happens to be. And there's obvious use cases for all this stuff, like moderating violence or moderating adult content. And there's obvious reasons why AI is so good at detecting certain types of things, like text. The language of characters might be stylized, but it has fundamental commonalities across it. The letter T doesn't look that different across different fonts. Logos, like the Apple logo, that's something that just doesn't change. So it's very easy to train and detect that sort of thing. So here are some examples. So these are live images. We can see a bunch of logos detected in a pyramid. You can see text being extracted that's burned in on the image itself. Famous faces. So anybody who's like even a little bit of a celebrity, there's just so much media containing that person that, again, it can be very, very easy to train and detect those types of things very, very accurately. Like, an AI model is going to crush finding a picture of Joe Biden or Donald Trump or somebody like that. Objects, like, it could be an article of clothing, glasses, whatever it happens to be. All of this is kind of random, though. Like, it's all disconnected. It's just, a computer doesn't view things the way we do, where we look at something, we instantly understand the context around it. It sees a bunch of disconnected objects and activities and text and things like that. So how does it put it all together? So this is a technology called clustering, which is where we take a handful of disconnected things and we see that when they overlap together, it is some sort of contextual topic. So here's an example of that. How do we see an image and determine that it's related to a wedding? So here's me and my lovely wife and a pony. So computer vision is going to see a man in a suit and a woman in a wedding gown and a horse. And then, the post caption is going to add a little bit more to that, which says mini pony plus husband and wife equals perfection. So husband and wife are probably pretty key for wedding. So a computer clustering model is going to put all those things together and then from there distribute it to people who it thinks will have affinity for it. So in this case, like friends and family who have engaged with other wedding content. The social graph is going to understand exactly who has done that in the past and who's important to you and has engaged in your content a lot. to put it a little bit more simply in like this Venn diagram, it's like, okay, we know there's a man in a tuxedo, we know there's a woman in a dress, we know there's flowers, so okay, what do all those things have in common? It's probably a wedding. So this is an overly simplified version of like, how are these AI models putting this together for like really specific things, like, you know, I'm getting fed all day long elaborate videos on like refinishing furniture, or elaborate videos on, you know, the next comic book movie. Like, even though I've never seen that comic book movie before, it knows that, okay, he likes that stuff, so I'm going to feed it to him. So this technology is getting really good, but it's not perfect, and the pitfalls of that are really, really important to understand. So we're going to walk through a couple of those. So this is an image of a woman in a shampoo bowl in a hair salon. Computer vision thinks it's a dog. Obviously, it's wrong. And there's some pretty easy to understand reasons for that I'll walk through. But what's more important for your use case is what happens to this post. So in this case, you know, we walk through those 3 initial steps. We walk through it, analyzes the content, says, okay, this is a dog. It distributes that content to people who it has affinity for that subject matter. So, okay, dog people. And then performance suffered. More people skipped this story than normal, and it got overall fewer impressions than normal because there's, you know, a little bit of a cascading effect when, you know, social's distributing content. We'll send it to like a test audience, see how they engage and view it, and then it will send it to a little bit bigger audience and a little bit bigger audience based on those results. So in this case, we never got past layer 1. So, you know, the mismatch in creative really hurt the performance of this post. So let's look at a really similar post. Again, woman in a shampoo bowl, and this text is a little bit hard to swallow, but it says, you know, person, haircut, washing worker, haircut, head, hair dye. This is like a much, much more accurate categorization of what's actually happening in this content. It's very similar, but the creative has some key differences. The end result was obviously much higher. This post did 10 times better than normal in terms of impressions, in terms of overall engagement. The key differences are, like, this image is not clear and in context, right? It's out of focus in the background. So what an AI is seeing is a wet mound of hair and then this text, which is a little bit kind of like too in the weeds for a computer to do something with. It's specific like hair color formulas, and it's a little bit jargony and maybe like too specific to get to a broad audience. But, you know, there's nothing else for the computer to grab onto. Like, that nice portrait mode blurred background is actually hurting in this case because it doesn't give us anything else to look at and provide context around. You know, in that wedding example, we had suit, we had wedding dress, we had flowers. In this case, all we have is wet hair. If we look at this one, we have a hand, we have the hair, we have a comb, we have a drain. So, you know, it can play that context game where in that Venn diagram, it says like, oh, okay, if there's a hand and a comb and a sink and wet hair, it's gotta be a hair salon, right? So, you know, what happened? It sends it out to other people who have affinity for hairstyling or hairdressing or whomever it happens to be. It's a captivating, high-quality image. They loved it, send it to more people. So, you know, that growth story had a creative problem that is solved by understanding the technology. So let's look at another example. Kind of similar case, like the shoes are not a dog. Why would a computer make that change? This is a little bit different because, you know, we can clearly see the product, it's in focus, it's framed very well, but this background is sort of just infinite texture. It didn't really, you know, there's no boundary to when like the fur stops or ends. So it's saying, it's fur, okay, animal, probabilistically, what are people posting about? Maybe it's a dog. I'm just gonna yeet this out there as an AI. So, you know, the thing to understand too is like, we don't have a huge amount of confidence in this match in particular, but it's the best available option for the AI, so it's just gonna run with it. So, breaking down the things that like AI is really, really good at versus like not great at, this is also really important to understand. So, like I mentioned earlier, text, logos, these things are a little bit more fixed and have a lot of common elements, so it's easy to detect. Famous faces, just by virtue of having a lot of training data, it's so easy to find a celebrity, historic figure, influencer, stuff like that. Branded photography tends to be, much more in focus and less stylized and just crisp, so you're getting really high quality input. There's common things that it's not so good at. So like most off-the-shelf AI models aren't going to do well with like IP. They're not going to do well with like finding Batman or finding Luke Skywalker or something like that, because that has copyright protections. And the underlying training data set is going to be absent those types of things. It's also not really good at rendered images. So this could be like 3D, like Pixar-style characters, CGI, animation. The reason being, if you think about those types of things, they're often extremely stylized. Like, it's easy for you to say, like, okay, 2 eyes and a nose and a mouth, but like, the computer sees SpongeBob and it's got like a sponge texture and a square head and all that stuff, and it can't really put that together in as clean a way. So it's, kind of a temporary problem, but if you post a lot of video game-based content or rendered images, cartoons and things, you might run into these types of problems where an AI just kind of doesn't know what to do with it, and you're going to get some inconsistent results. Another thing that's really important in our industry is obviously AI-generated images. So, a lot of people in this room are kind of concerned about, is this going to replace my job as a creative? And this is another area where computer vision really tends to suffer, is there's all kinds of like small inconsistencies with those types of images as they're generated today. Like, somebody might have 6 fingers on one hand, or, the stitching on this sofa might be like a little bit off and run into the floor. And when you're looking at it through like kind of that microscopic AI lens, it's really easy to screw up. And whenever I see like generated content run through my software, it almost always tends to mismatch. So it's really good credence for us as creatives to say like, look, let's not rely on this stuff. Let's actually do things the right way and make, real content. So, again, like computer vision is good. It's not perfect. It's going to be really essential that actual professionals continue to ride along and dictate brand strategy. Even as this technology evolves, we're kind of at this 80-20 rule point. Like, we had this huge burst of growth and innovation in this field and making it like kind of sort of useful. And then that next 20%, that's going to be hard. It's going to be a much tougher climb moving forward in the next 10, 20 years, even though it will continue to innovate and get better. So, overall, summarizing what we learned, subtle creative differences can really greatly affect how this AI is seeing your content, and in turn, how that content's distributed and seen from a marketing objective. If you can understand this, you're going to see better performance on social, you're going to have better results for your boss or your brand or whomever. If only there was a tool that could help. So, my shameless plug is, again, I'm a CEO here at Measure Studio. I built my dream tool just based on my experience going through these same problems running YouTube optimization at Disney. So, what I wanted to do was automate benchmarking, so it's very easy for stakeholders across teams to understand what worked, what didn't, what those things had in common. I spent gobs and gobs of time with dozens of people like tagging videos and manually analyzing, what do those things have in common, and tracking, themes and shows and stuff like that. So I built a tool that's powered by AI to kind of automate that stuff and eliminate that grindy work, take at least that, really time-consuming data analysis and packaging and reporting part off of social managers' plates so they can focus on, what they do best, which is making great content. So in any case, I appreciate you tuning in. Thanks for listening. And yeah, I'll open it up for any questions you might have about this type of technology. Yes. Yes, you were right there.
My name's Casey. I work at Studio 71.
Awesome.
Something that we really struggle with, specifically with the algorithm, is obviously TikTok. It's completely unpredictable, down to the point where we can't really even estimate, estimated impressions for our clients. We really leave it at 0 and depend on Instagram and YouTube to set those impressions and then boost it once those go live and we see what it is. Do you see this getting any better? Is there a stronger way to predict and guarantee that it's going to be a successful post? Because currently it's a very hard platform to navigate.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. We've put a lot of time into working on kind of calculating what is a normal range of performance for your account specifically. And I'll tell you exactly how we do it. It's not like a secret or anything. The way that we approach it is we're trying to, one, insulate for viral outliers. So, a lot of teams are taking a data set with like a simple average, and maybe amongst that data set there's a TikTok post with like 10 million views and the rest of them got like 50,000. That 10 million is going to skew that average really, really highly. So unless you're kind of doing a little bit more sophisticated statistics math, that can leave you holding the bag on something like a view guarantee in your example. Now, Studio 71's been around the block. I know you're not doing something that simple, but a lot of people are. The way we approach it is we're using medians with like bigger sample sizes. So like what we will do is we will look at for every account and importantly for every post type, because the normal behaviors for a carousel versus a reel versus a whatever are really different. And with TikTok, there's new post types now emerging on that platform as well. So same problem. Per post type, we'll look at like what is median performance in this category of content on this account specifically. So, different formats have different kind of performance expectations as well. And you still get performance all over the place. That median and, standard deviations plus or minus from that give you an idea of like what is a normal range. And if you're working off a view guarantee for a client or a campaign objective or something like that, you just go with the lower bound. Say like, okay, the low end of normal is what we're comfortable with conservatively forecasting here. That being said, if more content is always better, right? Like, you're going to have inconsistent results for any one piece of content. If you have a campaign that's instead going to pump out 10 pieces of content or 20 pieces of content, you're giving yourself more opportunities to kind of nail that normal range. Maybe I'm getting a little too in the weeds with statistics and stuff like that, but that's how we think about it. Any other questions I can be helpful with? Yes.
Hey, my name is Keenan. A little more specific to how it works, but not pulling back the cover, so to say. I'm just curious, I mean, when you think about social media posts, to me, that's a fire hose of content. So I'm thinking about the application of your tool. Are you working directly with brands? Are you working with agencies? Like, how do you manage? I mean, I can imagine like Nike having thousands and thousands of posts. Like how, and you think about that, all the tags, right? How are you processing that, or I guess who's your buyer?
Yeah, so we have a pretty wide cross-section of users. We actually got started in politics. My first customer was the Joe Biden for President campaign, which is really a weird place to start your startup. And then from there, our customer base is normalized more in like brands and media. So big customers you've heard about would be like Pepsi or Mattel. On the media side, it's like broadcasters like the BBC or ITV, digital publishers like Vox or Now This or Wave Sports or folks like that. My smallest customer is a single YouTuber. They make clay crafts. And, but yeah, we sit on a lot of data, but we rely on, just off-the-shelf cloud infrastructure from Amazon and folks like that who handle the mechanics of that problem. Cool. Well, great. I'm a little bit over time, but I appreciate you all listening. And we got the Measure Studio booth right up front if you want to gab with me a little bit and have a cup of coffee. Have a nice day.